Imagine a car that doesn't just drive, it flies. Imagine a car that has no pistons, no valves, no radiator, no antifreeze. An engine that has only 1/5 of the moving parts of a standard V8. Now, imagine that you can pull this car into a gas station and fill it with diesel, or kerosene, or jet fuel, or, if you are feeling desperate, a bottle of Chanel No. 5 perfume, or even tequila. This isn't science fiction. This was 1963. This was the Chrysler Turbine Car. It was the most advanced vehicle ever built by an American manufacturer. 50 of them were given to the public. They worked. They were beautiful. They were the future. And then, the government crushed them. Literally. In this deep dive, we are going to uncover the mechanical secrets of the engine that could run on peanut oil, the massive government conspiracy that may have killed it, and the tragic footage of 46 masterpieces being fed into a shredder while their creators watched. Why did the future die in 1966? Let's find out. The origin of the whine. To understand the turbine car, you have to understand the era. It was the jet age. We were going to the moon. We were breaking the sound barrier. The piston engine, the thumping, vibrating, dirty V8, felt like a relic of the past. Chrysler didn't just stumble into this. They had been researching gas turbine engines since before World War II. The man behind it was George Huebner. He wasn't just an engineer, he was a visionary. He believed that the reciprocating engine, where pistons go up and down, stopping and starting thousands of times a minute, was fundamentally inefficient. He wanted rotation, continuous, smooth, vibration-free power. The engine they built was the A381, and it was a marvel. In a normal car, you have explosions, bang, bang, bang. In the A381, you have a continuous flame. The engine sucked in air, compressed it, mixed it with fuel, and ignited it. The expanding hot gas spun a turbine wheel at 44,500 revolutions per minute. That is not a typo. 44,500 RPM. Your Honda Civic redlines at 6,000. This engine idled at 22,000 RPM. Because it was a turbine, it didn't care what the fuel was. As long as the liquid was flammable and could flow through a nozzle, the engine would run. During the press tour, George Huebner famously ran the car on diesel, then poured in a bottle of expensive French perfume, and the car didn't even stutter. In Mexico, the president ran one on tequila. It was the ultimate flex fuel vehicle, decades before that term existed. But the real magic wasn't the fuel, it was the sound. When you turned the key, there was no starter motor chug, chug, chug. There was just a rising whistle, like a 747 taxiing to the runway, a sound that promised you were about to leave the ground. The Italian connection. Chrysler didn't just want a cool car, they wanted a cool car. They hired the legendary Italian design house Ghia to build the bodies. These weren't mass-produced on an assembly line in Detroit. They were hand-beaten by Italian craftsmen in Turin. The design was breathtaking. It was painted in a custom color called turbine bronze. The headlights were recessed in the cells that looked like jet intakes. The rear end featured glowing taillights that mimicked the afterburners of a fighter jet. Inside, it was pure luxury. Leather seats, power steering, power brakes, and a center console that ran the entire length of the cabin, dominated by a massive chrome shifter that looked like the throttle of a bomber. Chrysler built 55 of them, 5 prototypes and 50 production cars. And then they did something no car company had ever done before. They didn't sell them. They didn't lock them in a museum. They gave them away. They launched the user program. Ordinary Americans, plumbers, teachers, housewives could apply to drive a $1 million prototype for 3 months for free. All they had to do was buy the fuel and keep a diary. It was the greatest marketing stunt in history, and it worked perfectly. Until the complaints started rolling in. The user program revealed the truth about the future. It wasn't perfect. The first problem was the lag. In a V8, when you stomped the gas, the car jumps. In the turbine, when you stomped the gas, nothing happened for about 2 seconds. The turbine had to spool up from 22,000 RPM to 44,000 RPM before it made power. At a stoplight, a beat-up Chevy could beat the futuristic turbine off the line. The second problem was the heat. The exhaust of a jet engine is hot, very hot. Chrysler engineered a genius regenerator system, essentially 2 spinning ceramic discs to recapture the heat and cool the exhaust. It worked incredibly well. The exhaust coming out the back was cooler than a standard V8, but people were terrified. Rumors spread that the car would melt the asphalt at stoplights or incinerate the car behind it. These were myths, but myths are powerful. The third problem was efficiency. While the car could run on tequila, it mostly drank diesel, and it drank a lot of it. The A381 got about 13 miles per gallon on the highway. In the city, it was far worse. Because a turbine engine is always spinning fast, even at idle, it guzzles fuel just sitting at a red light.
We are about to get to the part of the story involving the federal government, a massive tax bill, and a scrapyard. But before we watch these cars die, if you are enjoying this deep dive into lost engineering, please hit that subscribe button and the like button. We are on a mission to save these stories from being forgotten, and your support is the fuel that keeps our turbines spinning. Now, back to the destruction. The program ended in 1966. The cars were a massive success with the public. Over 200 families had driven them. They had racked up over 1 million miles. The engines were astonishingly reliable. They almost never broke down. Chrysler had a waiting list of 30,000 people who wanted to buy one. So why didn't they sell them? 2 words: import tariffs. Remember, the bodies were made by Ghia in Italy. Chrysler had imported them into the US under a temporary prototype status. If Chrysler wanted to keep the cars or sell them, they would have to pay the full import duty on 50 hand-built Italian supercars. The bill would have been astronomical, millions of dollars in 1966 money. Chrysler looked at the spreadsheet. Cost to keep the cars, millions. Value of the cars as used prototypes, zero. Cost to destroy them, a few $100s. The smog problem was another killer lurking in the shadows: nitrogen oxides. In the late 60s, the Clean Air Act was on the horizon. California was cracking down on smog. Turbine engines burn very clean in terms of carbon monoxide and unburned hydrocarbons, but because they burn so hot, they produce high levels of nitrogen oxide, or NOx. Chrysler's engineers tried everything. They couldn't get the NOx down without spending a fortune. With the fuel crisis of the 1970s approaching and the V8 still being cheap to build, the handwriting was on the wall. The turbine wasn't killed by a conspiracy, it was killed by economics. The date was set. Chrysler saved 9 cars. They donated them to museums with strict contracts. The engines had to be disabled. They could never run again. Chrysler kept 3 for themselves. The other 46 cars? They were taken to a scrapyard in Detroit. There is footage of this. It is grainy, black and white, and heartbreaking. You see the beautiful turbine bronze paint gleaming in the sun. A crane with a massive claw reaches down. It doesn't grab the car gently, it smashes into the roof. The Italian glass shatters. The hand-formed Ghia bodywork crumples like tinfoil. The claw lifts the car, engine and all, and drops it into a shredder. You have to imagine the engineers. George Huebner and his team had spent 20 years on this project. They had solved the heat problem. They had solved the metallurgical problem. They had built a car that ran on perfume, and now they had to stand behind a chain-link fence and watch their life's work be turned into scrap metal cubes. The engines scream one last time as the metal shears cut through the turbine blades. The complex regenerators, the ceramic discs, the high-tech fuel nozzles, all destroyed in seconds. For decades, the remaining cars sat silent in museums. But, plot twist, there is one man, Jay Leno. Jay Leno bought one of the 9 survivors. It was owned by Chrysler, and they sold it to him. But Jay didn't want a statue, he wanted a car. He brought in the original engineers, now old men in their 80s, to help him restore it. Today, there is exactly 1 Chrysler turbine car in the world that runs. If you're lucky, on a Sunday morning in Los Angeles, you might hear it. not a rumble, not a roar, but a high-pitched whine, a jet plane on the street. So, was it a failure? The accountants say yes. It lost money, it never went into production. But ask an engineer. The Chrysler Turbine proved that the internal combustion engine wasn't the only way. It proved that we could burn anything. It proved that a car could be smooth, reliable, and practically maintenance-free. It was a bridge to a future we decided not to cross. We chose the cheap V8. We chose the infrastructure we already had. We chose the easy path. Today, as we move towards electric cars, silent, smooth, torque-heavy, we're finally getting the driving experience George Huebner promised us in 1963. The turbine was the right idea. It was just the wrong time. And maybe, just maybe, it was too cool to live. Would you drive a car that sounded like a jet, or do you miss the rumble of the V8? Let us know in the comments. And remember to subscribe for more mechanical forensics. Until next time, keep spinning.